this abundant provision of God's grace, God's fuel, God's power for our lives ought to lead us to walk in a sense of victory. Right? As Paul will say in many other places, even in the midst of hardship, that somehow God's grace is abundant and powerful enough that even when we're being beaten up and pushed around and pressed down and dealing with sicknesses and diseases and shortcomings in our bank account, that even in the midst of that, we can still have victory. We can still reign. Why? Because of the abundant provision of God's grace that's continually available to us, not just on the beginning, but every step of the way. One last scripture, 1 Corinthians chapter 15. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And you're going to like this one too. Verse 10. Remember here, we're just looking for these instances of God's grace being testified to. What is God's grace good for? Ooh, it's good for a lot of things in life. I love this, again, this personal testimony. This is again, Paul, one of Jesus' followers, apostles, sent ones. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 10. Check this out. He says, "But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them. Yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me." God's grace, he says, was not without effect. And he's not talking here, again, about just the front door of faith. He's not here talking about just his initial salvation, although that's certainly included. He's talking about the living out of his life. But there's something significant that we have to gather here, that God's grace does not lead us to laziness. As he testifies and says here, he says, I worked hard. Right? I didn't sit back. I didn't lay down. I didn't hang out. I stepped up and did something. He says, now that I think about it, as I reflect upon it, that hard work that I did, it wasn't anything that I earned. It wasn't just my effort. It was God's grace. Doing what? Not just doing it for me, but empowering me, right, to do what it is that God has called me to do. And for each and every one of us this morning, God calls us to take steps of faith, to walk in that way of discipleship. And when we do that, we realize that there's an abundant provision of his grace, that he empowers us to do what he's called us to do as we work, as we move, as we serve, as we love, as we minister, that God's grace is an abundant provision for us. So I just came here this morning to tell you this, that when God saved you, he didn't exhaust his grace. He didn't use it all on you. He didn't run out of it. He's got more left for each and every day of our lives. That's why he'll never leave us. He'll never forsake us. He is ever present to us. And I think if there's a secret to life, I think it's this: the realization of God's continual presence in the outpouring of grace in our lives. If we would awaken to that, if we would realize that not just in this hour on Sunday morning or a particular time where we show up at a church event to serve, if we understood that God's presence was with us all of the time, and that his grace pours in and through us all of the time, it leads to that victory, that reigning, that power in our lives. And for me, that kind of grace will never stop amazing me. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you.